like to call this meeting of the Bellingham City Council's Public Work and Public Safety Committee to order. We have 3 items on our agenda today. The first is a Senior Activity Center Parking Interlocal Agreement.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. This interlocal agreement between the city and the county dates back to the 1970s. It's an agreement that has been renewed several times. This most recent time, the county is proposing a fairly large increase in the dollar amount, a little bit more than doubling it. We have been paying $6,000 a year to the county to pay or partially pay for parking spaces that are leased by the county from a private property owner to support the senior center. The negotiations between the county and the private property owner came back with a renewed cost per space. We were paying $14.42 per space. The property owner has requested or has negotiated with the county $30 per space, which is still, we believe, within the realm of market rate when you look at what you pay per month per stall. The interesting thing about this, and the reason why I wanted to bring it forward to council in open session, the dollar amount is relatively small, no more than $14,000 a year, but the funding source is the parking fund. And because there's always a lot of, not scrutiny, but interest in how the parking fund monies are used, we thought we would bring it forward to the committee for discussion. As I mentioned, it's historically been the parking fund. I think there is a nexus of somewhat to the parking fund in that this area is within the defined boundaries of the downtown, which is where we try to keep the parking fund money in the downtown. It's not always the case, mostly the case, but sometimes we do spend it outside the downtown for enforcement activities and other things.
Not supposed to, though.
Well, when the parking enforcement officers go out to do enforcement, and that's largely offset by fine revenue that's generated through the enforcement activities. But because of this, we wanted to bring it forward for discussion. As far as we know, and I have spoken with Brian Henshaw about this, this is the city's only contribution to the senior center. Other cities, in working with the county, pay directly to the county for support of the senior center. But for the city of Bellingham, it's been through this interlocal agreement for parking supply. Staff's recommendation is that it stay in the parking fund. We think that it is something that does make some sense. One of the agreements is that the city pays this share of the parking, but the county manages it. So the county manages the parking lot in terms of signing, enforcement, things of those natures to make sure that the parking is being managed correctly. So we're just a funding contributor to this. We did bring this item to the Transportation Commission at their most recent meeting. And there was some discussion about it, and there wasn't a strong recommendation one way or the other. They recognized that historically it's been parking fund. Like the council, they want to make sure that the parking fund revenue is spent appropriately. And like I say, wasn't strong. Absolutely, this should be parking fund, but there also wasn't, this shouldn't be the parking fund. And so we wanted to bring it forward, have a discussion with the committee, and get direction from you as we move forward. Ultimately, hoping to authorization for the mayor to enter into this agreement.
Okay. Many questions? Jack?
Ted, just a question about maybe some of the history of this. Knowing that you guys probably don't have much in the way of history, but back in 2002?
Yeah.
Was there a reciprocal agreement of some sort of, that we would go and help the county out and the senior center out through doing this particular thing? Are there other types of agreements like this where the county's helping the city out for other types of things that, that would kind of work the other way? Or was there kind of a quid pro quo that happened at that time?
I don't know the answer to that. We've tried to dig up a little bit of the history. This lease agreement and interlocal agreement is managed on the county side by their parks department, and their parks director also wasn't here at the time that this all came to be. And Clark Williams, who's been with the city for 20 plus years, it predated him as well in terms of the original agreement. And the best that we could determine was This was the city's original contribution to the senior center. It was a negotiated where the city pays more than the county for the actual parking agreement with the private property owner, but in turn the county manages it. Whether or not there's a similar agreement, I don't know. Not one that comes to mind where it may go the other way in terms of the county paying a little bit more, but the city manages it in exchange. I can't think of something like that off the top of my head.
Okay.
During that period, the main argument about for doing that is it's a county facility, but it's in the city. It's serving primarily the seniors within Bellingham. It's within Bellingham. The city doesn't contribute toward in other ways to the senior center. And since the recipients of the services there are our citizens, it's not, Linden, Ferndale, or wherever the other senior centers were, that the council felt at that time that, it's important for us to work with and provide for the citizens here for those services. So that's why we agreed to do it at that time.
Okay. Like I said, a follow-up question about, with this agreement, what happens if the property gets sold and gets redeveloped? Are all of these spots then just lost? Because it seems like we're kind of on a month-to-month from what I see. Or, a year-to-year.
Yeah, it's somewhat a standard interlocal agreement where there is a opportunity for either party to, upon written notice, either renew it or get out of the agreement. So I think in the event that the property changes hands and there's some development proposal that would no longer allow these spaces to be available for the senior center, that would be the agreement between the county and the property owner. Our agreement is just the funding agreement with the county. So I think, from our perspective, there's this ability to modify or terminate the agreement upon written notice. I'm only assuming there's some agreement similar to that between the county and the property owner. If something like that happens, that they would have to evaluate it.
If the senior center was outside of the city center area, I would be definitely arguing against the use of parking funds. But because it's within the city center, and it is providing parking spaces for, I don't have much problem with it in terms of using the parking fund, but I do feel it's legitimate use of providing parking spaces. Michael and then Jack.
I guess I disagree. I see your point, Terry, that I think we agree that downtown parking money should stay and benefit downtown. This seems like more of a stretch to me than I guess it feels like to you. And so I'd prefer that. I have no problem, by the way, with supporting the senior center. I think it's an appropriate thing for the city to do, to support members of our community. It's just the source of the funds. So I would vote for approval of the interlocal, but I would also see if there's support for a motion to have this not be paid out of the parking fund, to be paid out of the general fund instead. So I'm seeing if there's any agreement on that, whether I should move that or not.
Jack?
Well, I'm going to do two motions then, to bifurcate, because we're asked to approve the interlocal. The funding source is a different issue. So I will move to approve or recommend approval of the interlocal.
Okay. And Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would support that, the interlocal, obviously, but I would support Michael in looking at a different funding source. We don't fund we support the senior center, and in this particular case, I would like to do it like through our community development funds or through our general fund or from somewhere else because of the backlog of projects that are coming out of the parking fund and other funds. So I'm just supporting what you guys are doing.
Okay. So we have a motion before us to recommend approval of the interlocal tonight. All those in favor, answer aye.
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 Okay, got a unanimous on that?
Well, given what the mayor just said, I guess maybe we'll just have maybe a mixed recommendation for the council tonight, but, because I'm personally in favor of using parking fund money myself, but if it's a situation, if we can get additional money out of the general fund in one form or another, and it's workable, I certainly would support that.
Me too. Michael?
So then the question is, when do we have to decide the source of the funding? Because I'm prepared to make a motion to ask the administration to look for alternate sources. When do we have to have that decided by?
I guess,
Yeah, so Mayor, let me take a stab at that. So we budgeted only the $6,000 amount in the 2014 parking fund. So if the council direction was to keep this in the parking fund, what we would do is we would overspend on that line item. We would underspend somewhere else to make sure that we stay within our budgeted amount for 2014 rather than doing a budget ordinance to request coming out of the reserves, given the relatively minor dollar amount. That's the way we would typically do it. If the direction was to take it out of general fund, then I would defer to someone, to the mayor or to Brian Henshaw to find the appropriate place within the general fund, since we don't manage any general fund money in public works.
I guess the question is, when does the county need our payment?
Well, we pay monthly, and this new agreement would start July 1.
and we could do what Ted is saying for 14, because we've already allocated the money, and we can make the budget still balanced by reallocating the money. And I guess the direction potentially could be that you would like it to come out of the parking fund or out of a different fund for the 15-16 budget. That would be the easiest thing for us to do, I think.
Michael?
And that's what I was
So you're
talking
saying
about.
that the existing budget authority, which was for a lesser amount than this, could carry us through to December 30th? We'd have to overspend even this year.
Yeah, so what we would do is, within the fund, and we've got obviously various line items, the line item for this intergovernmental type work would be overspent by the 14,000 instead of 6, so we'd go over by the 8,000, give or take, depending on the timing of the invoices. What we normally do in a situation like that, when the dollar amount's small enough, we absorb it within our already approved budget, rather than coming back for request to spend out of the reserves. I mean, if this was a different situation, as a large dollar amount, we would have to accompany this with a budget ordinance to get additional authority. What we would do is just absorb the costs in the parking fund.
Okay.
And then I think, as the mayor's suggesting, then we would budget differently in 2015-16 and put it into a general fund line item somewhere.
So in other words, you don't need any action from us to overspend that line item so long as you make up the difference. Okay. So I would like to move that we request administration look for non-parking fund sources of funding starting the 2015 budget year.
Okay,
Okay.
so we got a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, unanimous motion on that, the decision. We'll recommend approval tonight. The next item is an update on the police and fire department's plan for fireworks education and enforcement.
Hi, Bill Hewitt for the fire department. And today we just wanted to come before council and just let you know what we're planning for the upcoming fireworks season. Obviously, with the ordinance that the council passed last year, we've got a change in our approach to fireworks this year. And starting on the 19th, fireworks, possession and use of fireworks anywhere in the city of Bellingham will be banned. Or actually it's June 18th. With that, we've prepared jointly between the police and fire departments, and with some help from the public works folks as well, we've planned an education and enforcement plan to make sure that all the citizens are aware of these upcoming changes. On the education front, we've already put together a story that's been posted on our website, and it's been put out through the Bellingham Herald. It was jointly written between Bob Vandriot here from the police department and Jason Napier, our fire marshal. That's already been put out there. Also on the education end of things, we are planning on putting up 2 electronic reader boards. One of them will go up on Alabama near Iron Street in front of the 911 center. The other one will be going up out on Northwest, out in front of Fire Station 5. Those signs will be up, again, giving people in high traffic areas the advisory that fireworks have been banned now in the city. Working with Public Works, we've designed some reflective metal signs that we're just going to put up on signposts at different entrances into the city that again remind folks that possession and use of fireworks are illegal in the city. And then on the 28th, June 28th is when fireworks can legally be sold elsewhere in the state of Washington. So starting on the 28th, we'll also be putting out an additional press release to again remind people once the stands are open that that they need to be aware that it is illegal here in the city. We've also worked together with the Whatcom County Fire Marshal and talked with them, and they permit the fireworks stands that are out in the county. We're going to be working with them to put flyers in those fireworks stands. So it'll still be up to the stand owners as to whether or not they actually pass those flyers out, but they're going to work with us and get that information out to the fireworks stands in the county to make sure that they're aware that if people buy them in the county, they should keep them in the county. And in addition to that, that's pretty much the education side of things. And then the police department and the fire department are working together on an enforcement plan. We'll have extra patrols out from June 28th through July 5th. Those dates are key because that's when fireworks are legal outside of the city. So we will be putting together patrol teams that have a police officer and a fire inspector together in a car and out doing education and enforcement of the newly instituted law.
Okay. Any questions? Michael?
Just to clarify, under our rules, it is not illegal to possess these fireworks. You just can't use them in city limits. So you could buy them out in the county, take them home, but then you'd have to, if you use them, you'd have to go back out into the county where it is legal. Is that correct?
Bob Vandriot with the Bellingham Police Department. That's actually, the law is actually not, says that it's illegal to possess or use.
So you would still be, you would be in trouble if you try to do what I just suggested.
Yes.
Okay.
Jack?
So is there going to be any outreach to the reservation on this with the county stands, or is it just going to be ones that are within Whatcom County specifically?
We're working with the county fire marshal's office. They only permit the ones that need permits. The ones on the reservation do not require a permit from the county fire marshal, so we don't have any real in there.
But we won't have any contact with the
we will communicate it with the Lummi Nation and see if they'd be willing to assist us with that.
Okay. And with the emphasis patrols, are you already understanding, from past experience, do you understand which neighborhoods are probably the hot spots, or is it just citywide and you're just going to be kind of emphasizing everywhere?
I believe, well, citywide is the proper response, but we certainly know the areas that are heavy for us. Alabama Hill, Roosevelt has been heavy. The south side can be heavy. Yeah, there's really, it's really just depends on where the 911 calls are being generated from. So just, and So the emphasis patrols allow us to work directly with the fire marshal's office. It's a two-person car with an officer and a fire marshal working together for the emphasis. The cost of that will be just over $5,200 from the police side and an equal amount for the fire side to do that from the 28th through the 5th.
Okay. And so we'll have, well, when 3rd, 4th, and 5th are happening, we'll have 2 patrols and probably like one on north side, one on south side, kind of dealing with things. And it's all going to be complaint driven, or? It
is complaint driven, yes. Certainly they'll be roving, and they can, they can be reactive to seeing something that's a hot spot, so to speak. On the 4th, it kind of fortunately works for us that it's a flexible resource day. That's normally a training day for officers. It's going to be an enhanced patrol day, so we will have about twice as many officers available with no overtime to help. But they are also doing the security for the harbor event in the evening, as at the beginning, throughout, and then at the end of it for traffic and security.
Okay. I know that resources are pretty tight on that day, especially on July 4th, but my personal experience in seeing what happens up at the lake and the fact that it's a drinking water watershed, there is a lot of activity that happens in the watershed, and I don't know if there's any possibility of just checking that out during the time, at least within the city limits. In the county, it's crazy, but in the city limits, if we can figure out some way of making sure that our lake isn't getting polluted by the heavy metals that are contained within some of these fireworks.
We'll make a note of that for the patrol.
Thank you.
One of the big problems is most of it is in the county, so we have no jurisdiction whatsoever, and it's not illegal. Yeah. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, this was for information only. Mayor?
Just to make sure we're really clear, though, our first responsibility is for public safety. So we need to make sure that if there's complaints outside the Lake Whatcom area, that we're taking care of those first. And I think
I'm not suggesting going out into the county. I'm just suggesting this within the city limits.
Right.
Next to the
But if
lake.
there's something outside of the Silver Beach area or whatever's in the city, that, it's supposed to be the public health and safety first,
Yeah.
so.
So if my house is broken into again, that takes priority over fireworks.
Okay, Terry.
I guess that's what you're saying, is that those kind of things take precedent over fireworks. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even amongst the fireworks complaints, though, our teams are mainly focused, or not mainly, but their primary focus in order of priority is going to be on the ones that are shooting them recklessly and causing hazards to human life or occupancies.
Okay, the next item before us is the Post Point Construction Final Report. Yay!
Good afternoon, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. In a second here, Freeman will go through a final presentation on the Post Point improvements. We are nearing the end and substantially complete. In fact, tomorrow will be the ceremony to celebrate finishing this project, a project that's been quite a while in the making. And Freeman will go through a few of the interesting facts about the project as we outline how we came to the point we're at today.
Thanks, Ted. Freeman Anthony, Public Works. And yeah, it's been a long trip. I mean, this, I believe we started this in... It was
2008.
2006 was when we first hit critical levels at the plant of 85% of our maximum daily load, which kicked off the whole facility, basically the facility study. And As Ted said, we are basically substantially complete now, going through the final documentation, so I can give you sort of highlights and then a final status here. So we'll take a look at construction facts first, talk a little bit about plant performance, the permitting, outreach, and then budget. And most of these are interesting items regarding the scope of construction, which is basically the largest thing we've got on record, as I understand it. So here's the final product as shot by Tor Ofteness in May. You'll see a fully completed secondary clarifier 4, which gives the plant a nice symmetry that we engineers are really big fans of. You can see on the right-hand side the newly completed A Basin 1. On the bottom of the plant footprint, you'll see the completed A Basin 4. Yeah, actually, sorry about that. There you go. So A Basin 1 is here. A Basin 4 is here. The project was to expand this, the capacity of secondary treatment, which was this existing tank here. We also added a new air delivery unit, which was the oxygen generation system that we're now using, and are repurposing this old oxygen generation building here for future, various future use. You can also point out that the trail has been reconstructed, and that will be open, and I'll touch on that in the permitting bit. You'll see screens along the south side, a large rain garden here, or bioretention facility. This is to treat on-site stormwater from the plant. And it's probably the main highlights. The shape of the adjacent open space area hasn't changed much, and we've also added another trail around the bottom of that, which is really, it's helped access for the folks that use the area, kind of spreads out a bit of the use there. So construction facts, 10,464 cubic yards of concrete, which will get you a sidewalk from the plant to Maple Falls. And you know, if we want to put that on the tip, you just let me know. 39% of it, the concrete, was recycled steel slag by volume, which is a very durable concrete. It can be challenging to work with, but we got through that. Cowden was our concrete supplier, so they helped us a lot working with getting that mix right, and also, you know, using more recycled products, which is great. Almost 3 million pounds of reinforcing steel. That's a little bit more than 11 Boeing Dreamliners, which is quite a bit of steel. And tying that stuff is a challenge. 9,957 diffusers. A key thing is the plant went from pure oxygen to just putting atmospheric air through it. It's much more efficient to generate that. It uses less electricity per cubic foot of air delivered. Those diffusers are part of that. And to support it all, because it's all kind of sitting on a lot of fill and clay, 18,000 linear feet of pipes, and that is not spelled correctly. More construction facts. Okay, 55 toilets and second use of pottycrete. We put a pottycrete sidewalk about halfway around secondary clarifier 4. Total construction time, it's 483 working days, or 13.4 dog years. So from our, Mortensen gave us some of the other updated hours. It's a great project. We were over 200,000 hours, 200,000 man-hours worked, person-hours worked. We had 2 what we call restricted injuries, so those were injuries that did impact our ability to progress, but we learned from them. Mortensen takes those very seriously, and so they investigated them and reported back to Public Works safety staff. And then on the city side, about 8,000 administrative hours, mostly me, but definitely a bunch of inspector time and other folks like Rory and such, kind of keeping an eye on things at a high level. So the performance of the plant, I think the big thing is the air delivery efficiency. In the old days, we would generate pure oxygen and mix it in from the top. Now we just bubble it up from the bottom. So that's about a 50% increase in air delivery, and that's on a per year basis. That's about 118 homes that we're not using. PSE has been a great partner in this. We're working together with them to file basically paperwork to get some rebates because of this efficiency this efficiency component of the project. And what that got you was a 42% increase in secondary treatment capacity. So secondary treatment is treating the dissolved biochemical oxygen demand. So not your solids, not your floaties, but the things that are actually dissolved and they're very difficult to get out. With a few modifications to our primary treatment system, that'll get the plant 20-year plus as far as a design life. What this does as far as moves the bottleneck that was in secondary treatment before, it's now primary that'll be the bottleneck. And again, that's 16 years out. We have a few little things that we can do in-house to get that set up for a 20-year plus design life. That's all based on the projections that we had when we did the facilities report, which we revised after the economic downturn, but still holds that line that we agreed upon afterwards. We did all that in about a 3% increase in the plant footprint, so hearing neighbor concerns and the desire to keep the area a public destination, we kept it on a tight footprint there, and that was, I think you can see that in that first picture. So for permitting, 5,798 plants were used either for screening the facility from the surrounding neighborhood or environmental mitigation. We did nip into some wetland buffers, so we were required to rebuild some areas. And I'll just hop back here real quick. You'll notice on the top left, so the old trail used to go through here and out towards the railroad. We've now cut that trail off, and we have a little viewing platform here that gets you a couple feet up off the ground, so you can sort of take in the lagoon. You can actually see the restoration efforts that Public Works has been working on for that lagoon over the last probably 5 or 6 years now. So that's the new configuration. We welcome you guys to come down and take a look at it. The trail will be open at the end of the heron season, so the heron are still fledging, so generally that's towards the end of October. So hopping back here to permitting. As I mentioned, a lot of new wetland creation to mitigate for some of the buffer impacts and other items. We had over 130 heron biologist site visits just to make sure that they were okay with what was going on down there and checking in on them. Over the 3 years, we had 100 heron hatched at the colony that's adjacent to Post Point, and I think that's a good success story right there. We did in fact limit our ability to work on secondary clarifier 4 for about 6 months out of the year, specifically because of its proximity to that heron colony. So I think the end of all that is it's possible to do heavy construction like this and jointly share some airspace, if you will. And then, 5 permitting agencies, over 20 different permits of one type or another. We're getting right down to being done with them. Public outreach. We did a bi-weekly newsletter, or we did a weekly newsletter. 89 of those that went out, basically giving folks that were on the email list an update on what we were doing and what they could expect for the next couple of weeks, including night work, which we definitely had some of that. Rough calculations suggest over 600 donuts, possibly more, and that included a dozen cookies from a great neighbor who attended almost every of the contractor Coffee Fridays. Lower right is the community bulletin board that we could update as well, kind of on a monthly basis to let folks know what was going on, give them a schedule of what was going to happen, and over 1,000 informational postcards. Some of those would be for the heavy work that we did in the summer of 2013, where we shut part of the plant, basically shut it off and had to bypass pump around it. And we did have some reasonably late nights out there with a lot of lights, so trying to keep folks informed. So budget. I've got my little asterisk here. We are still working through some cost issues. Not really surprising for a project of this nature. Right now I'm forecasting 49.2 in construction cost. So there's no soft costs there. There's no consultants. That's not city staff. That's just the final contract with Mortensen Construction. If you took a look at all the construction contracts, 56% of those were in either Whatcom or Skagit County, which was great. We had a couple local subs get some of the big subcontracts, which was great. And then not only that, you had local suppliers for your cranes and your concrete that really helped keep those numbers up there. So this is all within the bond budget that we had for this project, so we're really happy about that. and it's actually 3 months ahead of schedule. Our original schedule showed the project being complete in September of 2014. And that was basically because we see a lot of high BOD that time of year. We do understand that the fish processing community is expecting a pretty heavy year this year too, so we're excited that we are very ready to go and to manage that. So what's left? As I said, we're going to close out the project finances. We have a couple small contracts going on that are part of this, but I've kept them out of the Mortensen contract. We're just doing some additional fencing just to sort of permanently sort of go around the area where the folks can go and can't go at Post Point, trying to dog-proof the fences. So we've got that separate contract that's actually, I'm going to do that in the next couple months. We're also repurposing the oxygen generation building, but we're doing that separately. Doing the as-built is very important for keeping the staff down there, keeping them aware of what they've got, as they've got a pretty new widget to use down there. So that's a big thing on my end, is to make sure the 20-something boxes of files and O&M manuals that we were reproducing twice get to them as well. And then there'll be some monitoring, not only the plant but the site. We'll be taking a look at how the system works, if there's things that we want to tweak. The plant has been future-proofed for what we expect to see as potential regulations in the future for treatment of nutrients. So when and if that comes to be, we have various pipe spools in certain places, so we're now ready to move forward that as needed. We'll watch the performance of the system now. There's a lot of flexibility in the new A-Basin one, whereas the old ones didn't really have that, so that also allows us to manipulate various bacteria and things like that to get what we want to really keep our level of treatment as high as it can be. Mitigation requirements, those will be basically checking in on those mitigation efforts, the lagoon and things like that, the new wetland plantings, making sure that those are responding and developing and doing what they need to do. Noise and lighting, so there is some new equipment down there, so we'll want to keep track and see, okay, well, is it noisier? Are there certain days or certain processes that make it louder than it used to be? We don't think that that's the case. We've designed it to be both quieter and to have less of a presence from a visual standpoint, especially at night, but we'll want to keep track and make sure that that's the case. And smells, odors, we've added a lot of odor management to not only the new facilities, but the existing ones. But again, we'll want to monitor that to continue to be good neighbors to the south side. And then the vegetative screen, that in itself is something that can't really design trees to be 20 feet tall right off the bat. You have to kind of monitor that over a period of time. And we had a great one before, and it took us a couple years, and we'll have a great one again. But we'll keep an eye on that. Larry has always been really good about filling in the holes as need be over the years to keep the screen there and to keep the noise down. And with that, we'll basically see some folks down there tomorrow, and I believe have some carrot cake. Any questions about the project?
Jack.
Thank you for your report, Fritz. That was good. One thing I think I heard you correctly, but I just want to make sure. You said that the trail wasn't going to be open up until the end of the herring nesting season,
Yeah,
which is in October?
That is correct. No, end of August, typically.
End of August.
Now, if our biologist goes down and assesses the site and says, okay, they're done, then she'll give us basically an email will suffice. I go down to whoever's running the show in the planning department, and they give me the nod, and we can open it early. But the permit says you check with the heron biologist or end of August.
So is this going to be an annual situation where the trail has to shut down?
Right now, no. And I would have to qualify that. Instead, if somebody came along and said that they ought to, then there would have to be a discussion. But there's nothing in the permit that says following construction that those permit conditions continue.
So we'll continue. We've had this contract with someone to come in and monitor the heron site, and we'll continue with that. That's something that's been in place for many years. We'll continue to do that, and based on the results of the annual monitoring, if we need to change how we operate it, then we will.
Okay. Another question I had, it had to do with the construction costs that you said at $49.2 million. Does that include engineering?
No, so there's no soft costs in there.
Because we
But
had,
that
our
include all
bond
the
was what,
contractor administration.
55 or something?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, so when you add in the construction budget for the consultant and then their subs and various things, yeah, you get closer to that 55 number.
So the engineering was less than 6 million in the other soft costs?
For the construction phase, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And I guess one last question, or just maybe a comment. You were saying that in 16 years, the primary process will have reached its capacity. We're going to be working within our sewer comp plan to try and extend that as far out as possible, through pretreatment and other things.
Yeah, I think that, that's based on the projections and the comprehensive plan, even when we did reduce the population growth, what we did after, as Fritz mentioned, we kind of readjusted what the outlook was over the 20-year horizon. Certainly, we'll continue to work with industrial users, with the port, with other heavy strength or high strength users, and make sure that we do what we can on the front end to reduce the loading at the plant.
Okay.
Michael?
Speaking of the significant industrial users, can you remind me where we ended up with regard to how their utility bills were determined and whether or not they would basically get a cut in those utility bills if there was pretreatment?
Yeah, so when the council adopted the rates in 2012, we established 5 classes of strength. And really, class 4 and class 5 are the industrial users. Class 3 is a typical commercial customer. And it's based on the strength of the wastewater, and the rates are adjusted accordingly. So the higher the strength, the BOD and the TSS, the total suspended solids, the higher the rate. And it's a combination of a base rate and a volume rate. So the more water they use, also they pay more, obviously. It sets up nicely for the customer to be able to reduce strength through either their business practices or pretreatment. If they decide to put in some type of pretreatment facility to reduce the strength prior to entering the system, they would be reduced down to a lower classification. So it does give a financial incentive for our high-strength industrial users to first look at their business practices, which many of them have done, and we've been working with them for many years. But as we looked at adjusting our high-strength rates, certainly folks went in and looked at how they did business and adjusted to get those strengths down. The process for doing that is they need to work through the Department of Ecology and the City of Bellingham to go through a testing protocol to show that the strength of their wastewater over an agreed-upon period really is lower than their permit says. And so we continue to work with industrial users because the rates were adjusted fairly significantly in 2012, and we phased them in 13, 14, and so on, so that their rates get higher to pay their proportionate fair share. And we work pretty closely with Department of Ecology and I think the 9 permitted high-strength users that the city serves.
Of those 9, do you know if any of them are moving forward with pretreatment, or so far just operational adjustments? Has any gone forward to Ecology, for example, to actually ask for a reassessment?
Right. At this point, it's just their own best practices, either to reduce water, which saves them money, or to reduce their loading in terms of keeping stuff out of the system. Anyone that's gone forward to look at getting a permit reduction and actually construct a pretreatment, there was one business that started that process, but has since stopped. The business is actually no longer in town. That was Portionables. They were very, very high strength. They were our highest strength customer. But we've had discussion, the mayor and I have had discussions with the port and continue to do so because that's probably the best opportunity in the future down at cold storage facility to build some type of a regional pretreatment. Nothing today.
Okay, thank you. Because, my concern is the 20-year lifespan of our plant, and we can extend that period, perhaps with pretreatment. Thanks for
Absolutely.
the update.
Yep.
Thank you for the report.
Thank you very much.
And yep. So this committee is now